Welcome along to our preview of the best of the rest on Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe Day, because not only have we got the most prestigious race in Europe in the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe itself, but the whole card featuring 5 other Group 1 contests. And we kick off with the juveniles, starting with the Colts in the Prix Jean-Luc Lagardere. Jamie Lynch alongside me as we cast our eye over what are some high-quality, hot Group 1s to get stuck into. Starting with the 2-year-old Colts, a Group 1 in which the declarations are out. 8 runners represented here in a race that was won last year by Angel Bleu for Rafe Beckett. No representative for the Brits this year. 3 from Ireland, however, from 3 different yards. And Aidan O'Brien has won this 8 times previously, and he fields a very interesting runner in the form of the Antarctic, fresh off the back of a run just last week.
Because I suspect if you asked Aidan O'Brien at the start of the season what trip the Antarctic will be running over, the last thing he'd have said was 7 furlongs as a juvenile, because we are looking at a full brother to Batash. But he hasn't shown the same electricity in his races. And see this for yourself in the Prix Morny. He shapes like 7 furlongs is exactly what he wants. This is the second of 3 times in which he's seen the backside of his stablemate Blackbeard, but no shame in that whatsoever, because Blackbeard won the Middle Park last week, a race in which the Antarctic was a fine second. So that Middle Park form is the best in the division, the best as far as this race is concerned. But can he defy those genes and stretch out to 7 furlongs? It's the conundrum, Gina, of that he shapes that way, but he's not bred that way at all.
It's a really interesting point. He will face form from the home team, well, from his home team, in 2 other Irish-trained runners, Shartash and a runner from the Jessica Harrington stable. Shartash in particular boasts some good form as well for Johnny Murtagh.
Yeah, he's been in Group 1s the last twice, and I think that he certainly shapes as if this trip is perfect for him. He showed that in the National Stakes. This is probably slightly easier than the National Stakes, and Shartash is just a really polished and professional horse who brings Group 1 form over this trip, which can't be said of the Antarctic. As far as the home team is concerned, for France, we have got Bryce Sky, who's probably the best colt in the lineup for France, but he was beaten by a filly last time, and Tigre comes here as a filly, Gina, in the Colts race, because this is 7 furlongs, the Marcel Boussac is a mile, and this trip is felt better for her. So she's beaten the boys once, she gets the filly's allowance. Can she do it again? She's a really fascinating horse to try and do what Happily did and be a filly to beat the boys in the Lagardere.
Back in 2017. Do you think she can do it? Who's your selection for the race?
I think the Shartash has got the right profile for a race like this. It's a race that rewards polish and professionalism, and he's got that, and he's got the stamina box ticked, which can't be said of the Antarctic.
The Prix Jean-Luc Lagardere then for the Colts leads us on, as Jamie said, to the mile trip for the Premarcel Boussac and the fillies, a race replete with superstars on the Roll of Honour. Found, Zarkava, Miesk, Triptych, they are dripping off the page. Very much a case of potential over proven performance at this early stage, but we have a big field lining up and a field replete with plenty of promise as well. The one that jumps off the page, Jamie, potentially in a strong international field featuring representatives, as we said, from the home team, France, Britain, Ireland and Germany, could be the unexposed, the sexy profile of Kalina, who we've only seen on 2 occasions, but has looked something out of the ordinary so far.
She's been classy, she's been clinical, she's been fabulous in 2 races so far. This is the second of them at Chantilly, and yes, she faces a very different class and calibre opposition in the Marcel Boussac than she's faced in either of her 2 races. But see for yourself her potential and her power. She runs right away from this field at Chantilly, and she's overtaken her stablemate Left Sea in the same colours as the principal hope for the Marcel Boussac. So with her, a daughter of Frankel, Gina, she just seems to have everything in the right place at the right time, and she is going up in class. She's missing several rungs of the ladder, but that in itself is significant. So you ask who's got the most potential in the race, you've just seen the answer to that question.
How strong is the international contingent, though? There's certainly plenty of them in terms of numbers.
We've got an strong Irish contingent, spearheaded by a never-ending story for Aidan O'Brien, who is the sort of classic Marcel Boussac profile, and that she contested the Moyglare last time out. She was 4th there, which didn't really do her full justice, and she's a really ready-made filly for these types of races. And don't forget that Aidan could have run several in this field, but he's relied on Never Ending Story. You mentioned the international angle. There's a German filly in here called Habana, who's a fascinating contender. She's almost like Germany's answer to Kalina in that she's had 2 starts, brilliant both times. She's a daughter of Kingman, and she beat the boys last time in the trial, the big trial over in Germany, and was really impressive in the process. So she's got a low draw. She's a little bit under the radar because of her background, but I think she's been every bit as impressive in Germany as Kalina has been in France. So depending on the prices, I am warming to Habana for trainer Andres Voller.
She goes in the Premarcel Boussac. That brings us on to the Arc itself, but we'll skip over and have a look at the other Group 1s. The Prix de l'Opera up next for the fillies and mares over the 1.25 miles. And we've had a supplementary entry for this. Jessica Harrington has opted to put Trevor Wunce, a fast improving 3-year-old, in the field, but the eye is immediately drawn, Jamie, to Nashwa. This has been the plan all along for the Prix de Diane and Nassau winner. She's been given a break to freshen up, and she's back for more, albeit swimming in slightly warmer waters here in a big, strong, very competitive looking opera this year.
Yeah, outside of the Arc de Triomphe, this is the race of the day, given the strength in depth of the race. But as you said, Gina, it's Nashwa who does jump off the page because of her development. This came quickly after the Oaks, an Oaks in which she finished behind Tuesday at Epsom, but she didn't quite seem to see out the 1.5 miles so strongly as the pair who beat her. But this was the 1.25 miles of the Prix de Diane, and she was in the right place at the right time and held off La Parisienne in second. La Parisienne was as low as 12-1 for the Arc de Triomphe itself, but didn't make the cut, and she reopposes against Nashwa. So there's a case to be made for saying that La Parisienne can reverse form given their proximity and given their different runs through that race, but that underestimates what Nashwa did in the Nassau. And a good one, Gina, that was one of the performances of the year, colt or filly, any age, any sex, any country. Her performance in that Nassau was a real wow moment.
It was. She faces the only horse to have beaten her so far in Tuesday, who is stepping back down to 10 furlongs. But interestingly, if we have a look here at the jockey bookings, fascinating that Ryan is on board Joseph O'Brien's Above the Curve.
So Ryan won the Oaks, beating Nashwa on Tuesday for Aidan O'Brien, but it's Aidan's son Joseph who sends out Above the Curve. Now Ryan has ridden Above the Curve the last twice and got on famously with her. She's a huge big filly. She's a daughter of American Pharaoh. She's won in France already over this course and distance. Is that right, Gina?
She's really come to hand sort of late on in the season. She looked at Chester as if she'd be a later developing type, and it really feels like the pieces of that jigsaw are being put together with her, and I wouldn't rule her out at all. Are there any others that maybe caught your eye that we perhaps haven't seen the best of yet? I
think My Astra is one horse who definitely is on the shortlist. This is a race that's 11 of the field are 3-year-olds, so you're naturally drawn towards those. But My Astra is a 4-year-old with hardly any racing. But when we have seen her, she has at times taken your breath away, done more so than when she won a listed race at Ayr by 12 lengths. After that, she went into a Group 1 against La Petite Coco, who was just a bit too hardened and better positioned for her. But she sat out the summer to wait for today, to wait for perhaps the softer ground. So My Astra is a 4-year-old for whom we still haven't seen the best of. But I just was blown away by Nashwa at Goodwood, and I think that despite the strength of the field, she still sits above the rest of them looking down. What do you think? Do you think the same?
Huge Nashwa fan. I really liked her for the Derby, but 10 furlongs has very much proved her bag, and she just keeps on getting better. Nashwa for the Prix de l'Opera looks to have a really good chance of justifying favouritism there in a big, strong field. Big, strong field assembling for the sprint as well. The penultimate race on the card is the Prix de l'Abbaye, a race in which the British and Irish trained contenders tend to have a very good record. France have only won 2 of this in the last 10 years. 8 representing the UK in this year's renewal, 6 from the Irish trained runners as well. The Platinum Queen jumps off the page at the bottom of the field. She is a 2-year-old, which is interesting coming into this, but she's danced every dance and continued to give her running on every occasion in the Midland Park colours. For Richard Fahey and Holly Doyle, who'd be looking for the quickfire double after ride on Nashwa in the Opera. She's come very close. Can she get her head in front on Sunday?
Well, she's gone very close to doing what her task is in the Abbaye, in the Nunthorpe, when only Highfield Princess proved too good. And I wouldn't hold this defeat in the Flying Childers against her. Look at the distance. She is coming clear of the rest of the field, and it's a really good filly, Trillium, who runs her down only by a nostril. And that was after the Platinum Queen had just drifted towards that far side rail. So even though she's really pacey, really professional, there is still some lingering greenness. But what an opportunity for her, Gina, because she gets £21 off the older colts, £17 off the older fillies, and she's got a low draw in 7. Relatively low, but low enough. And this is a race that is determined and sometimes predetermined by the draw. Of the last 12 winners of the Prix de l'Abbaye, all bar 2 came from a single figure stall. So she's hit lucky with the draw. Will she be lucky enough to win a prize that you sort of think that her season deserves?
I'm a big fan of the Platinum Queen. We've got last year's winner defending his crown, A Case of You, well drawn in stall 4 as well for Ado McGuinness. Perhaps not quite in the same form that we saw this horse coming in last year, but still a formidable flag to fly for the Irish team. Yeah,
it is, and it's a query though that, having won this race last year, that he's coming in relatively cold this time, because he was given a break prior to misfiring again in the Flying Five when he was badly drawn. But it means a lot that you've been there and done that. There have been various double winners of the Prix de l'Abbaye, and it is a course that does reward knowledge and pace and power, and he has got all of those things at least at his best. But could this be the first time since 1978 that a 2-year-old wins the Prix de l'Abbaye?
I'm with her, are you?
Yeah, I am. I'm rooting for her as well.
The Platinum Queen then for the big sprint. It brings us on to the final race of the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe meeting, which will be the Foret, the only Group 1 over 7 furlongs in Europe. And as such, you get horses that we've become well familiar with over this trip. None more so than Kinross. It was a wonderful Arc weekend for trainer Rafe Beckett. He comes in red-hot form to this year's renewal. And Kinross himself coming in on the back of a hat-trick. He's won the City of York Stakes, hugely valuable 7 furlong Group 2, went on to follow that up with success in the Park Stakes, and he's looking for the treble here. He ticks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, he's the perfect 7 furlong horse. Rafe Beckett has worked that out, Frankie Dettori has worked that out, and it's a relationship between Frankie and this horse, which is one of the selling points. They know each other really well, and Frankie gets the best out of Kinross. And even though New Energy in second and is reopposing closes at the finish, it was the speed of Kinross, the 6 furlong speed, which effectively won him that race in the penultimate furlong. He's established himself as the best in the division in Britain by those last 2 wins. And this is a race that rewards exactly that. So we are thinking and hoping that Kinross goes 3 places better than last year in a smaller, more manageable field, and no Space Blues to worry about this time either.
No one was beating him last year. His closest rivals could be the fillies, couldn't they? Sandrine, Tenebrism, all formidable rivals in behind, but Kinross looks the one to be with in the Foret, and what is a fabulous day of racing this Sunday live on Sky Sports Racing, headed by the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, but 5 other Group 1s on the card, and you can watch it all live on Sky Sports Racing.